When I was 18, I was heavily immersed in the occult, specifically practicing ceremonial magic, which I was inspired to do by an occult creator on YouTube, purchasing quite a few of their products, and even going as far as to write a public testimony about my successful manifestations I had made with their products. But I am 24 now, and a practicing traditional Catholic. And this November, I was reminded of the testimony I had written, which is still displayed on this individual's website. It came to my attention while praying for the souls in purgatory, as Catholics do in the month of November, that I'll probably spend many years in purgatory making reparations for leading others into the occult from this testimony. And while I've confessed to practicing the occult in the past, nonetheless, so long as the testimony is still public, it will continue to lead others into sin, and therefore it is my belief that it is only right that I start making reparations for it now by making a new testimony in support of the Catholic faith and against the practice of witchcraft and the occult. My journey into paganism didn't just start when I was 18. It was a long process beginning actually in childhood, and it is there that I will begin my story. Growing up, my family was Catholic, but we had an odd mix of beliefs. We weren't strict Catholics, as my parents were also Steiner teachers, and believed in Rudolf Steiner's theosophic philosophy. We did go to church on Sundays, somewhat frequently, but I would say my siblings and I lacked proper catechesis in the Catholic faith. Having said that, I always craved worship and spirituality. I remember the first time I was introduced to Wicca. I was about 10 or 11 and had seen an image online of someone's personalized altar. It had a chalice with a pentagram on it, and an athame and various bits of nature strewn about it. I thought it was beautiful. I didn't know what it was for or the purpose it served. I just knew whatever it was, I wanted to practice it. I read up on it and decided it was for me, and promptly told my dad I wanted to be a Wiccan, to which he was rightfully concerned and tried to persuade me out of it, but I was hooked. I wanted to know more. What was it? How could I practice it? What did I have to do? It became a fixture in my mind. While this intrigue into Wicca started brewing in my mind, I had a dream. Growing up, I often had very vivid spiritual dreams, and one night I had dreamt that I was walking downstairs and looked out the window down below to see Jesus standing there patiently waiting for me. I came to him, and I remember seeing the terrible scars all across his hands. He took me into a dark room where the only thing lay was a table that sat a burger and fries, if you can believe it. It looked like the most delicious, succulent burger I had ever seen, and I was hungry. He said, "This is what paganism is." And I took a bite, and it tasted of nothing. While it looked delectable on the outside, it had no substance to it. In hindsight, it was simply to show that paganism wasn't going to fulfill me or satisfy my hunger for God and a spiritual life. The next morning I woke up and was quite shocked. The dream was incredibly profound, and I knew it too, and thought about it for a long time. Unfortunately, however, I set the dream aside in pursuit of my curiosity. I felt it was wrong, but I researched Wicca more and more, and couldn't deny the pull towards Wicca was stronger than the impact of my dream with Christ. It also didn't help that my parents weren't strict enough. They too had dabbled in the occult and New Age belief before converting to Catholicism, and unfortunately, some old beliefs still lingered. We had crystals around the house, which aren't inherently bad. After all, they are a part of God's natural design in creating the earth and are very beautiful. But my mom believed in burning sage and having different crystals for different intentions. And we also had spirit animal cards that I would love to shuffle and interpret. Having unrestricted access to the internet and things within my own home that made it easy to cultivate my curiosity in paganism wasn't a good thing. It opened up a doorway, and I will speak frankly, for demonic influence later in life. It planted an evil seed in my head only for it to be exploited later. I would also like to say that at the same time I discovered Wicca, our family experienced several insect infestations within our house. At one time we had an infestation of fleas, and on one separate occasion, infestation of wasps, and on another, of bees. And one time, after my dad had sprayed holy water around the house, 2 light bulbs burst out of their sockets, one almost hitting me in the face, all of which are signs of demonic activity. This curiosity persisted all throughout my teens. The more I spent researching or reading about witches or ghosts, the more my belief in Christianity waned, and the dream I had simply forgotten. It wasn't just about curiosity, though. I did very poorly at school and was often taken out due to stress and overwhelm. Education became a big insecurity of mine, which I escaped by hiding myself further in paganism. It was a comforting, nature-woven blanket of symbols and control. But also at an early age, I always felt a great desire to define myself, who I was, what I stood for, and felt at the time paganism was the closest thing I resonated with. Perhaps it is because I never allowed anything else to develop in its place. Paganism permeated through everything, even into my friendships, as I would bond with other girls about the subject, like pulling out tarot cards at sleepovers and giving my friends readings. One particular time sticks out to me. My dad came into my room one night and asked if I was planning on doing something weird. I lied and said no, and he had told me he had this strange feeling that I was going to do something that would let an evil spirit attach itself to me. He confiscated all of my fiction books about witches and any incense I had. Little did he know, my friend, when we were going to have a sleepover, hatched a plan to go to the local graveyard and cleanse any negative spirits from the place. It was an absurdly stupid idea, but interestingly though, the next day at school I actually got in trouble and suspended, and the sleepover never ended up happening. I drifted in and out of school through my teens, but finally left permanently when I was about 16. I developed an interest in herbal medicine at the time, and I persuaded my parents to let me study at home. And while I was at home, I started to smoke a lot of cannabis, which I do think in hindsight contributed to me finding my way from paganism and into the occult. Just as my childhood dream predicted, paganism and worshipping elemental spirits and nature wasn't enough anymore. I started to become more aware of the world, society, and human consciousness, and wanted to try and dig deeper at the underlying workings of it all, on a spiritual level. I actually can't even remember how exactly I stumbled upon it, but I became aware of the 7 Hermetic principles described in the book called the Kybalion, a book supposedly written by 3 unknown initiates, revealing the lost wisdom of Hermes Trismegistus, which I now became privy to. As the book openly states that if you're reading it, it's because the wisdom within has chosen you, because you're special. It's not like I didn't just buy the book off Amazon because I saw someone writing it about on YouTube or anything. No, really, it's because I was special. It captured everything I had intuitively known. I became obsessed with seeing all the Hermetic principles of polarity and cause and effect play out in my day-to-day life and in the people around me. It was just so clear. It was only after becoming Catholic did I realize that the Kybalion is just an incredibly dumbed-down version of the philosophical concepts from Aristotle and Thomas Aquinas' Summa Theologica, but that's a conversation for a different day. This book, however, was precious to me. It showed me how smart I was, and how I couldn't cast any of these pearls of precious knowledge amongst the swine that were the people around me. I was now the true beholder of this private wisdom that nobody else could ever possibly understand. I became incredibly insufferable around everyone I knew because of it. What's interesting, though, is that even at that time, Christ never left me, and sometimes even made himself and his guidance explicitly clear. For example, the day I developed an interest in astrology, 2 Jehovah's Witnesses knocked on my door to ask if I had time to talk about the dangers of divination and astrology. I, of course, said no, and closed the door and went back to reading. But one other time that sticks out to me in particular had to do with something my brother gave me. At the time, he actually was a seminarian and wanted to become a Catholic priest, and kindly gave me some Catholic books, which I never read, but held on to. One day I had a lot of turmoil about my conflicting beliefs in Catholicism, and this newfound interest in the occult, and I was journaling these feelings. And at the time I wrote about a scenario of me being tested, and if it came down to it, whether I would choose Christ or the occult. I wasn't sure at the time if I had to choose. I was very confused and thought maybe Christianity and parts of the occult could be compatible. But even though I wasn't sure, I believed myself to be of good faith, and thought I would obviously, without hesitation, choose Christ. But something in that moment brought my attention to the books my brother gave me that were sitting on my bookshelf. And it came to me, What if that moment to choose was right now? That I had a choice right then and there to either pick up the books he had given me or pick up the occult books that were on my nightstand. I remember freezing and my heart racing. The test I had imagined coming sometime in the future was actually now, in this moment. So what would I choose? Fortunately, I did pick up the Catholic books. Unfortunately, though, I didn't actually read them, and like a dog returning to its vomit, I went back to my occult books. And in hindsight, that wasn't my brightest moment. The interest continued and developed into a fascination with ceremonial magic, the kind offered by practices such as the Golden Dawn, which combine hermeticism and ritual. It was also at this time that I started watching a lot of ceremonial magicians on YouTube. They discussed things like sigils, the Kabbalah, and astral projection. It was exactly what I was searching for, and at one time led me to think about joining the Golden Dawn as a member, which I'm really glad I didn't. The more I got into ceremonial magic, the farther I got from being able to relate to those around me. While I didn't always have the best relationship with my family at times, I was usually open and talkative. I became either excessively overbearing with what I read, or I became secretive and standoffish. It was like the occult was a predator, and it started to isolate me from everyone I knew so it could exploit me further. When I was 17, my family moved from my hometown, where I'd lived all my life, to a new city. It was an extremely stressful time, and one that I didn't deal with in a healthy way. After I moved, I became incredibly agoraphobic, and would spend months in my room alone reading and studying the occult, drawing hundreds of different sigils to manifest things like a new laptop or a relationship. I also desperately wanted to start doing the rituals I'd read about, casting circles and vibrating the god names in Hebrew. I'll admit, it caused a lot of arguments with my family. They had become more serious in their faith over the years and started attending a traditional Latin Mass. I, at this point, wasn't attending Mass at all. Several months went by and I was miserable. I didn't know how to get a job because I had no experience or education. I had no friends and barely spoke to my family. I was alone. I think it took me about 9 months to think I should start going to church again with them. Not because I was interested in returning to the faith, but rather just to be around people and maybe have someone to talk to. So, I started going. Attending a traditional Latin Mass was strange at first. The women wore veils, the priest sung in Latin, nobody shook hands and said peace be with you. It was all very serious. And you're probably thinking that it's at this point in the story that I had some grand epiphany and return to the faith, but that's not actually the case. At this point I was 18, and it would still be a couple of years before I started practicing again. Not long after I started attending Mass, I started seeing a guy who also attended. I'm not going to divulge too much detail about the person out of respect for the individual's privacy, but I will say we had a very tumultuous and unhealthy relationship. I introduced him to all the occult things I read and believed in, all the videos I watched, everything. And it didn't take us long to stop attending Mass together. We developed a relationship very much centered around the occult, which is a big regret of mine, as I put his soul in jeopardy. Again, something I believe I will spend many years in purgatory repenting for. We had an up and down relationship for about 1.5 years, and over the course of it, I saw how much the occult negatively affected him. Just like me, it consumed me, and at times he displayed signs of psychosis. It was actually very concerning. At the time I didn't see it though, as he was my first relationship and I thought it was perfect. I thought I had manifested him. After all, how many sigils had I made hoping to find my perfect spouse? And here I was, in this relationship. It was at this time I wrote my public testimony in support of the occult. I wrote things about how happy I was, how I had found my perfect spouse, and how I manifested things like a laptop. Reading that testimony from someone else's point of view must have sounded great, almost too good to be true. Well, because it was. I never revealed actually how negatively impacted I was by that relationship, or how I got that laptop, as if I couldn't have just gotten a job and paid for it myself. I didn't need to make any sigils for it. But you know, in movies, the trope where someone made a deal with the devil, and while they technically got all their material success, you see actually that it all came at a price previously unexpected? Yeah, that trope exists because it's true. See, I didn't reveal that I had a huge argument with my family about how I got that laptop. It was the beginning of COVID and my parents were extremely concerned about it. Nobody knew the severity of it, and everyone was being encouraged to stay inside. Lockdown started the month of my birthday, and my boyfriend wanted to buy me a laptop. I really wanted it, and I told my parents I was going to go to the store with him. We had a huge fight, but I went anyway. And while I got what I wanted, it came at the expense of the relationship and peace with my family. In hindsight, this was a common pattern. My involvement in the occult brought nothing but chaos and division with everyone around me. This wouldn't have been a symptom if the occult was truly good and divine as it's promoted to be. Ever since discovering ceremonial magic, my life had become volatile, and it just kept getting worse and worse. I had started to change for the worse too. When I'd first started out, I made rules about what I allowed myself to do and not do. Things like blood magic or cursing I was at one time strictly against, and promised myself I would never do them. The deeper I went, though, and the more I read, the more those boundaries relaxed. I thought that those rules were originally set out of ignorance, but at the time I didn't understand the true reason why it was actually okay to do them. And now that I'm in the know, I can decide for myself when and if it was appropriate to curse someone or use my blood in a ritual. And just like my life, my off and on again relationship got worse and worse, until it finally came to a head and I finally broke it off for good. It was painful and challenging. I stuck it out with that person longer than I should have because I was made to believe that he was my soulmate. He was the person I divinely manifested after all. And afterwards, I was lost and so confused. It was at this time that I began to have a change of heart. I didn't have an earth-shattering epiphany, but I did realize that everything I thought I knew about how the world and spirituality worked was a complete lie. I didn't know anything. Clearly, since I had just witnessed all the evil fruits my pursuit in the occult bore. It never fulfilled me truly. It was just a dangling carrot on a stick, and I was the naive donkey, always searching for the next bit of occult wisdom to make my life better, to unlock everything. Because I was so obviously wrong about everything, I told myself that I was going to give it all up, and I was going to start attending Mass in earnest because I didn't know where else to go. I thought, well, if I go to Mass and try to really believe in Christ and his teachings, then at least I know God will have my back. I decided then to throw everything relating to witchcraft and the occult out. I wanted nothing to do with it anymore. Interestingly, as soon as I decided this, I started to have nightmares about all my occult possessions I had purchased over the years. It was as if it hadn't revealed its true nature to me until now I was out of the devil's grasp. And the nightmares only stopped as soon as I threw everything out. After that, my life got immeasurably better. I confessed everything and started attending Mass every Sunday. I started seeing someone else who also attended Mass with me, to whom I am now very happily married to, and are now expecting our first child. My relationship with my family has never been better, and I have a sense of peace in my life I previously never imagined possible. That all being said, though, I'm not going to sugarcoat this testimony like I did my previous one, and say my life has been absolutely perfect since becoming Catholic, because that wouldn't be honest. It has been a long and arduous journey to get where I am today, and even very recently I've struggled with my faith. But I want to say that the Catholic faith provides something that the occult could never: grace and true wisdom to weather the storms that life inevitably throws at you, and never more than you can handle. If I could give any advice to my younger self, and to anyone who may be struggling with this, is stop engaging with anything relating to witchcraft and the occult. Throw anything that might tempt you back in. Stop watching videos and reading about it, and even things you may be unsure about. For me, that was astrology, and it was hard to let go, but it's truly best that you do. Instead, purchase a beautiful rosary, and learn how to pray it. Contemplate the mysteries of it, and start reading the Bible, and continue to do it even when it may be boring or it isn't clear why you should do it. It's important because there's something working behind the scenes that will make your life and your soul more fulfilled than you can ever imagine. And it is with that I would like to say that the occult brought nothing but suffering and pain to myself and those around me, and I renounce it fully, and embrace the Catholic faith in all of its truth and beauty, and I sincerely hope that anyone who's watching this will be inspired to do the same. God bless.